You guys, Alien, this movie. It just gets under your skin, doesn't it?
It really does. A true masterpiece.
And we're going to dive deep into why that is. You gave us this amazing analysis of it, so get ready, because we're about to unpack what makes Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien more than just another monster in space.
It's a film that works on so many levels.
Right. It's the atmosphere, that feeling of dread that just seeps into you. It's the whole corporate greed angle, which sadly feels more relevant than ever. And it's Ripley. What a heroine.
Absolutely. She's the blueprint. So many sci-fi films from that era that feel dated now.
Yeah.
But Alien just works.
It really does. So how does it do that? What's the secret ingredient, would you say?
Well, it's a masterclass in suspense, that's for sure. But it goes deeper than jump scares. Alien taps into something primal, something ancient, a fear of the unknown that stays with you long after the credits roll.
Totally. And you can't talk about Alien without talking about the setting, right? The
Yeah.
Nostromo. This isn't some sleek, futuristic spaceship. It feels real.
Exactly. Remember those exposed wires, the grimy corridors, it's almost like a submarine in space, which is deliberate. Scott wanted to create a lived-in feel, something relatable almost.
And that just makes the vastness of space outside that much more menacing.
Right. You've got this incredible contrast. Outside, this endless, indifferent void. Inside, cramped, claustrophobic almost.
It really highlights how vulnerable they are. Just a tiny crew, essentially alone out there.
It makes you think about the risks we take, venturing into the unknown. Deep-sea exploration, space travel. Alien taps into that unease we all feel about what's lurking beyond our comfort zone.
Totally. And speaking of the crew, they're not exactly your typical space heroes, are they? They feel like everyday people just trying to do their jobs.
Which makes it all the more unsettling when things start to go wrong. This isn't a crack team of Space Marines. They're just dot workers. And they're completely out of their depth.
And that's when the corporate betrayal really hits home, right? The sense that they're expendable.
Exactly. But before we get to that, let's talk about how Scott introduces the horror. Because Alien is a masterclass in slow burn suspense.
Oh, absolutely. It's the buildup, that sense of dread that just builds and builds. You've got the silence, that eerie, derelict alien ship, that creepy space jockey corpse.
It's brilliant. He understands that what you don't see can be far more terrifying than anything you do see.
Totally. So before we get to the xenomorph itself, let's talk about that chestburster scene. I mean, even knowing it's coming, that scene still gets me every time.
Right. It's iconic for a reason.
So why does it work so well?
3 words. Well, actually more than 3. It's the 3-act structure of terror. Act 1. Anticipation.
That face hugger clinging on the Kane's face.
And this thing, this unknown entity, growing inside of him. We know something awful is going to happen, but we're forced to wait.
It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know it's coming, but you don't know when.
Exactly. And that anticipation just ratchets up the tension, the fear, everything. And then bam, Act 2, visceral horror.
That chestburster exploding out of Kane's chest. Ugh, I still can't watch it without cringing.
It's shocking. It's graphic, but it's impossible to look away. It taps into our primal fears about our bodies, about our own mortality.
And just when you think it's over, the horror just keeps on coming.
Exactly. Act 3, the relentless predator.
Mhm.
This is where H.R. Geiger's design for the xenomorph comes in, and it's just, it's brilliant and horrifying.
We'll talk more about Geiger's genius in a bit. But you're right, it's that pursuit, that relentlessness that elevates the xenomorph from your typical movie monster. This thing, it doesn't stop.
Which makes it all the scarier.
Yeah.
This isn't some creature you can reason with. This is a force of nature. Speaking of things we can't reason with.
You know, it's interesting you say that because the xenomorph isn't the only thing that's unsettling about this movie. You've also got this whole corporate conspiracy angle going on.
Oh, absolutely.
This idea that the crew, these people, they're expendable, just pawns in this bigger game.
And that's what elevates Alien. It becomes more than just a monster movie,
It really does. It makes you think.
It's a commentary on corporate greed, this idea that profit trumps everything, even human life. And what's scary is that it feels more relevant than ever today, don't you think?
It's true. That disregard for human life, just to make a buck. You see it everywhere, sadly.
It's everywhere. And in Alien, it adds this whole other layer of tension to the film, doesn't it?
Definitely. We're not just worried about them surviving this creature, but also about them being betrayed by the very people who sent them out there.
Exactly.
And this is where Ripley's character arc really takes center stage.
Right. She goes from Warrant officer, someone who follows the rules.
Trust the chain of command.
Exactly. To someone who has to adapt, who has to challenge everything she thought she knew.
She's put in an impossible situation.
And she makes these impossible choices. She challenges authority, she questions everything, and ultimately, she becomes the leader that they so desperately need.
And that's what makes her such a compelling final girl, right? We talked about this a little in your notes. Why Ripley? What sets her apart from other strong female characters in horror?
I think it's because she's both relatable and aspirational. You know what I mean?
I do.
She's not some superhero. She's just a woman who's thrust into this nightmare.
Just trying to survive.
But she rises to the occasion. And she doesn't just survive. She uses her intelligence, her courage. She fights back.
She's resourceful, she's adaptable, and she is definitely not afraid to get her hands dirty.
Exactly. And she's terrified. But she doesn't let fear control her. She uses it.
That's a great point.
She embraces her fear. And in doing so, she finds this inner strength, this power. I mean, that's inspiring, isn't it?
It is, and it's something we can all relate to, that feeling of being out of your depth and finding the strength to keep going.
Exactly. So all of that to say, she's an icon.
And she wouldn't be nearly as effective if it weren't for the film's masterful use of sound. Or rather, the lack of it.
Right. The silence.
It's so effective.
Most horror films, they rely so heavily on a score to tell you when to be scared.
Oh, totally, like those jump scare violins.
Exactly. But Alien,
So much silence.
it's all about what you don't hear. It just lets the silence speak for itself.
Yeah.
And it makes every little creak of the Nostromo, every hiss of escaping air, it makes it all so much more terrifying.
Because you're waiting, you're anticipating, and you're basically left alone with your imagination.
It's pure psychological terror.
Which, let's face it, is often far more effective than anything else. So we've talked about the setting, the characters, the suspense, the use of sound, but we can't talk about Alien without talking about the monster in the room, right? The xenomorph. It's one of the most iconic movie monsters of all time, and a lot of that is thanks to H.R. Roll. Geiger is incredible, and I mean incredible design. It really is such a terrifying creature. So what is it about Geiger's design that just works so well? What makes it so creepy, so unforgettable?
It's that blend of the organic and the mechanical. It's biomechanical, sleek, skeletal almost, but also there's this weird, almost sexual element to it, which just adds this whole other layer of wrongness.
Yeah, it's like it's messing with our perceptions on like a fundamental level.
Exactly. It's like something out of a nightmare, like you said, but there's also this feeling that it could exist somewhere out there in the vastness of space.
Oh, totally. And the fact that we never really learn anything about it, where it came from, what it wants.
It just makes it that much more terrifying. Is it driven by instinct? Does it feel anything at all? We don't know.
Yeah.
And that just adds to the mystery and the fear.
Totally. It's like the human imagination is scarier than anything a filmmaker could ever dream up.
Absolutely. And then there's that ending. Ripley, she's finally safe, she thinks. She's blasted that xenomorph into space.
You think it's over.
Exactly. And then, bam.
There it is. In the escape pod with her.
Talk about nightmare fuel.
So good.
Some people interpret that ending as a reminder that you can't escape your demons,
Oh,
no
interesting.
matter how hard you try.
What?
Others see it as a testament to the xenomorph itself, this idea that it represents this primal force, this unstoppable force.
Right, like nature. You can't control it, only try to survive it.
Exactly. And that's what makes Alien so brilliant. It works on so many levels. It's this terrifying creature feature, but it's also a commentary on corporate greed, about our place in the universe. And at its core, it's about the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable terror.
Well said. It really makes you think. And it stays with you, which is why I love doing these deep dives, taking something you think you know and really unpacking it.
It's amazing what you pick up on watching it through a different lens.
I know, right? So, as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you want our listeners to keep in mind next time they watch Alien?
Pay attention to the details. Scott's use of lighting, those camera angles, it's all very intentional. He uses darkness and shadow to create this constant sense of unease, of dread. And the way he'll focus on these seemingly insignificant details, like a drop of water, a flickering light.
It's creepy.
It is, but it's also brilliant. Because those details often foreshadow something terrifying that's about to happen.
It's like he's planting these little seeds of dread and you don't even realize it until it's too late. I love that.
It's masterful.
It really is. Well, this has been another fascinating deep dive. You guys, we'll see you next time for another exploration of the films and TV shows that have shaped our world.